The wind outside the cabin howled low against the wooden walls, carrying with it the distant sound of the plains stretching endlessly under the night sky. Inside, the fire burned softly, casting shadows that moved slowly across the room, as if even the light itself was uncertain what would happen next. Clara sat at the edge of the bed, her hands tightly folded in her lap, her breath uneven, her heart pounding louder than the storm outside. She had never been this far from everything she knew, never this close to a life she didn't fully understand. And yet, she had chosen this, or at least, she had chosen not to turn back. Across the room, Ethan Cole stood near the door, his broad frame still, his presence heavy in the quiet space between them. He hadn't moved much since they entered, hadn't said much either. That was the kind of man he was, measured, distant, careful with every word as if speaking too much might break something that couldn't be fixed. Clara swallowed, her fingers tightening slightly. "It's quiet," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the crackle of the fire. Ethan glanced at her briefly, then back toward the window. "It usually is," he replied. That was it. No comfort, no explanation, just truth. Clara nodded faintly, even though he wasn't looking at her. Silence settled again, thicker this time. She could feel it pressing in, filling the space where words should have been. Her gaze drifted toward him, studying the man she had agreed to marry without ever truly knowing. A cowboy, a rancher, a man with a reputation that traveled ahead of him in whispers rather than stories. Some said he was cold. Others said he had simply lost too much to feel anything at all. Clara didn't know which was true, not yet, but she could feel the distance in him, like a wall that had been built carefully, layer by layer, until nothing could get through. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "I know this isn't easy," she said after a moment. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Then slowly he turned to face her. His eyes met hers for the first time since they had entered the room. There was something there, something guarded, something unreadable. "You think it's easy for you?" he asked quietly. Clara hesitated, then shook her head. "No." Another pause, then she added, her voice softer now, "But I knew it wouldn't be." Ethan studied her, as if trying to understand something he wasn't used to seeing. Most people avoided honesty like that. Most people dressed their fear in something easier to accept, but she didn't, and that alone made her different. "You can still leave," he said. The words were simple, direct, but they carried weight. Clara blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "In the morning," he continued, "I'll take you back to town, no questions asked." The offer hung in the air, unexpected and real. Clara looked down at her hands, her thoughts racing. She had imagined many things about this night, fear, uncertainty, even regret, but not this, not a choice, not from him. Slowly, she lifted her gaze again. "And you?" she asked. "What happens to you?" Ethan shrugged slightly, though the movement felt heavier than it should have. Same as before. Something about that answer settled deep in her chest. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. The loneliness behind it, the acceptance of it. Clara took a breath, then another. Her voice trembled slightly when she spoke again. "It hurts," she whispered. Ethan's expression shifted just slightly. Not confusion, not surprise, just attention. She swallowed, her fingers gripping the fabric of her dress as she forced herself to continue. "It's my first time, tonight." The words hung between them, fragile but unhidden. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but something in his posture changed, something subtle, something that softened just enough to notice. Clara's eyes flickered, uncertainty creeping in. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what you expect." Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair before looking away for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "I don't expect anything," he said. That wasn't the answer she had prepared herself for. Clara blinked. Nothing? He shook his head once. Not from you. Silence followed, but it wasn't as heavy as before. Something had shifted. Not completely, but enough. Clara looked at him for a long moment, trying to understand, trying to see past the distance he kept between himself and the world. Then why did you agree to this? She asked softly. Ethan didn't answer right away. The fire cracked behind him, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Finally he spoke. Because I thought maybe... He paused, his jaw tightening slightly. Maybe it was time to stop living the same day over and over again. That answer felt real, too real to question. Clara nodded faintly, though her thoughts were still spinning. She looked down again, then slowly stood from the bed. The movement was hesitant at first, but she didn't stop. She took a step toward him, then another. Each one felt heavier than the last, but she kept going, until she stood just a few feet away, close enough to see the lines in his face, close enough to feel the quiet tension that surrounded him. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted it, not toward him, not yet, but toward something else. Slowly, carefully, she reached for the belt at his side. Her fingers brushed against the worn leather, hesitating for a brief second before gripping it lightly. Ethan stilled completely. His gaze dropped to her hand, then back to her face. There was no anger there, no assumption, just a question he didn't voice. Clara's breath caught, her heart racing as she held onto the belt. Not pulling, not forcing, just holding it like it meant something more than it seemed. I don't want to be afraid, she said quietly. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Not of this. Not of you. Ethan didn't move, didn't interrupt, but he listened, really listened. I don't know what happens next, she continued, her grip tightening slightly, but I know I don't want it to feel like something I'm forced into. The words settled deep in the space between them, honest, raw, unfiltered. Ethan's expression changed again, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to matter. He reached up slowly, his hand closing gently over hers where it held the belt. Not to stop her, not to take it away, just to steady it. Then it won't, he said. His voice was firm, but softer than anything she had heard from him before. Clara looked up at him, searching his eyes for something she hadn't been sure she would find. And this time, she did. Not distance, not coldness, but something steady, something safe. The tension in her shoulders eased, just slightly. Not gone, but different. She didn't let go of the belt, and he didn't pull away. The firelight flickered between them, casting a quiet glow over a moment that neither of them fully understood, but both of them felt. And for the first time since she arrived, Clara didn't feel like she was stepping into something unknown alone. The moment held, quiet and fragile, like something that could break if either of them moved too fast. Ethan's hand remained over hers, steady, warm, not controlling, not demanding, just there. Clara's breath slowed little by little, her grip on the belt easing, not because she was letting go, but because she no longer felt like she had to hold on so tightly. The storm outside softened, the wind no longer striking the cabin with the same force. Inside, something else shifted, something neither of them had planned, but both had needed. Ethan gently loosened his hold, not pulling away completely, just enough to give her space. You don't have to prove anything, he said quietly. Clara looked at him, her eyes searching his face again, but this time without the same fear. I'm not trying to prove anything, she replied softly. I'm trying to understand it. He nodded once. That made sense. More than anything else she could have said. She slowly released the belt, her hand falling back to her side, though her fingers brushed against his for a brief second longer than necessary. Neither of them pointed it out. Neither of them moved away immediately. What happens now? She asked after a moment. Ethan exhaled slowly, his gaze shifting toward the fire before returning to her. Now, we don't rush, he said. We take it one step at a time. Clara considered that. It wasn't the kind of answer she expected, but it was the kind she needed. She nodded slightly. All right. The word felt small, but it carried trust. And trust, in a place like this, mattered more than anything else. Ethan stepped back just enough to create a little distance. Not cold distance, not the kind that pushed her away, but the kind that gave both of them room to breathe. You should rest, he said. Clara hesitated, then glanced at the bed behind her. For a moment, uncertainty flickered again, but it didn't take over like before. She turned back to him. And you? She asked. I'll be here, he replied simply. She studied him, then gave a faint nod before moving back toward the bed. This time her steps were steadier. Not perfect, not fearless, but stronger. She sat down again, her hands resting loosely in her lap, her thoughts quieter than they had been before. Ethan remained near the fire, adjusting a piece of wood as the flames shifted slightly. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't filled with tension or uncertainty. It was calm, and that made all the difference. Time passed without either of them noticing how much. The fire burned lower, the shadows softened, and the night settled into something quieter. Clara lay back slowly, pulling the blanket around her, her eyes still open as she watched the faint glow of the fire. Ethan, she said softly. He looked over. Yeah? She hesitated, then spoke. Thank you. He didn't answer right away, but after a moment, he nodded once. Get some sleep, he said, and this time, she did. Morning came gently, the first light slipping through the small window and touching the edges of the room. Clara stirred slowly, her body still tense for a brief second, until she remembered where she was, what had happened, and more importantly, what hadn't. She sat up, her gaze moving across the room until it landed on him. Ethan was already awake, sitting near the table, his posture relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before. Not fully relaxed, but closer. He looked up as she moved. Morning, he said. It was simple, but it was more than he had offered before. Clara blinked, then gave a small, genuine smile. Morning. She stood carefully, brushing her dress lightly before stepping toward him. There was still uncertainty, still newness, but there was something else now too. Comfort. She stopped a few feet away. You didn't leave, she said quietly. Ethan frowned slightly. Wasn't planning to. Clara nodded, her smile softening. Good. A small silence followed, but it wasn't awkward, it was easy. I meant what I said, she added after a moment, about not wanting to be afraid. Ethan leaned back slightly, studying her. And? She met his gaze. I'm not, she said. The words were quiet, but they were strong, stronger than anything she had said the night before. Ethan nodded slowly. That's a good place to start. She took another step closer, not hesitant this time. And I don't want this to feel like something we just survive, she continued. I want it to be something we choose. That caught his attention. He straightened slightly, his expression shifting in a way that showed he was really listening. You're saying you want this, he said. Clara didn't look away. I'm saying I want to try, she replied. With you. The honesty in her voice left no room for misunderstanding. Ethan held her gaze for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. All right, he said. No hesitation, no conditions, just acceptance. Clara let out a small breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and this time, she smiled. Not nervous, not unsure, just real. The kind of smile that came from knowing you weren't alone anymore. Ethan noticed, and for the second time since she had arrived, he smiled too. It wasn't forced, it wasn't brief, it stayed. And that changed everything. The days that followed didn't transform into something perfect overnight. There were still moments of uncertainty, still things they didn't know about each other, still space to figure out what this life meant. But it was no longer built on fear. It was built on something stronger: choice, trust, and the quiet understanding that neither of them had to face it alone. One evening, as the sun dipped low beyond the hills, casting golden light across the land, Clara stood beside him outside the cabin. The air was calm, the world stretching wide and open around them. "You know," she said softly, "last night, I thought everything would change all at once." Ethan glanced at her. "And?" She smiled faintly. "It didn't." A small pause, then she added, "But something did." He nodded slightly. "Yeah." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them steady and warm. Then Clara reached out, not for his belt this time, but for his hand. Her fingers slipped into his, gentle but certain. Ethan looked down at their hands, then back at her. He didn't pull away. He didn't question it. He just held on. And this time, there was no hesitation in either of them, because whatever came next, they would face it together.